Okay, hi everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay Rosen. I'm a volunteer with Nefesh B'Nefesh. I myself made Aliyah with them just over 15 years ago. And here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the everyday Hebrew that you need in Israel to succeed. And everyday Hebrew meaning everything from paying bills to understanding the news, to lodging a complaint, to speaking with your neighbors, to go on a date, all the various things that are everyday speak that you may or may not be hearing in, or learning rather, in Ulpan, or in day school, or in yeshiva, or university, or even your previous trips to Israel. We're at a bit more of an intro level in this class, so it's a bit more frontal, both because it's a webinar and there's a lot of you on this call and it's wonderful. Also because the nature and notion of Zoom, but also taking a step back and realizing how little resources there are for beginners when it comes to everyday talk. We usually wait until an intermediate or advanced level to get to slang and more complicated ways of speaking, when the fact is Olim by choice, as I like to call ourselves, are usually coming from a much higher academic and intellectual and educational viewpoint that we should already know how to use it or be familiar with some of these terms. And as always, this is a very user-friendly session. So we want to hear from you what topics you want to go over. In fact, today's is submitted by you as one of the participants. And also as a couple reminders for you. This is our last session before we break for the holiday season. We'll come back to you after the Chagim, which is actually a clue into today's topic. And this session and all previous sessions are up on Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel. So just go to youtube.com, type in Nefesh B'Nefesh or Cafe Oleh. You'll find all our previous sessions. They usually get uploaded rather 1 to 2 days after. So if you're looking for last week's, just look for Cafe Oleh uploaded 1 week ago. You'll be able to find it, and so forth. Today's class. So today's class was requested by you participants to talk about idioms and expressions. We've talked about slang quite a bit. 2 weeks ago we did slang. Last week we did not talking about politics without being political, and some of that included some expressions. Today we're going to do some idioms. There are many, many, many idioms in Hebrew. And we're only going to do a small bit of what's included in all those. But I thought that's important for a couple of reasons. It was asked by you. There's actually 2 very relevant idioms that you should know in the last few weeks that we're going to include today, as well as some other ones that even if you don't feel comfortable using them, you'll at least recognize when they're used. And they're used a lot in everyday talk, on TV, in scripted shows, on the news. So it's going to be really good for you to hear all of these. And just one bit of housekeeping as I start teaching through spreadsheet, but I'll explain each word as we go. If you have a question about what I'm presenting about specifically today, i.e. idioms, or specific questions about the idioms we go through, please write your question in the Q&A box in the Zoom menu bar. If you have a question about anything else, you don't like my English, you don't like my topics, you do have a topic that you'd like, or just to say thank you, please write that in the chat box. Okay, Q&A just for this class, chat anything else not concerning this class. Specifically, there's a lot of you on this call. Right now, there's just about over 100 of you, and there's only one of me, both teaching and moderating. So thanks in advance for your cooperation on that. Right, let's get started. Do some idioms. So first off, as you see here at the top, as always, Hebrew on the right-hand side with the dots and bars that indicate vowel sounds, transliteration in the middle, and then English. We're going to do things a little different today in that we're going to go over some classic idioms, what they more or less mean in English. I'm not going to write out the literal meanings, but I probably will go through that as we talk. And then if there's a non-idiomatic way to express it, it'll be on the left-hand side. Okay, so first off, what are we talking about? Row 2. We're talking about various pieces of Hebrew grammar that are called, or syntax rather, because we're talking about words that refer to matbea lashon, niv, or bitui. Okay, any of those are expressions, mean idioms or expressions, right? We're not talking about aphorisms or a pitgam in Hebrew. An aphorism is an expression that we use like a saying, right? Think of like the book of Proverbs, or just a saying, early to bed and early to rise, that kind of stuff. These are idioms, expressions. Obviously, the difference between idiom and metaphor, idiom and simile or slang, I'm not going to get into today. Just know that idioms often come with a lot of cultural baggage, right? It's not something you can necessarily pick up a dictionary and find, let alone understand, because there's a lot of cultural baggage behind the origin of those. Any three of these words refer to an expression or an idiom. Matbea lashon is like a linguistic coinage of something, right? Matbea means a coin, like, and lashon is a tongue, but it also means language. Niv means both a fang, like a tooth, a fang, a sharp tooth, but also it's the word we use in Hebrew for an idiom. And bitui means an expression, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an idiom, but it's an expression nonetheless. Okay, let's start with the first one. Para para, or para para, row 4 here, or you'll also hear shwai shwai. Okay, para para is actually the idiom here. Shwai shwai is Arabic, and it means exactly what it says. There's no idiom behind it or in front of it for that part. Para para literally translates as cow cow. It comes from a longer expression that's actually not the best for high conversation. Para para is the beginning of an expression, para para nitfoket kol hayadel, which translates cow by cow will screw over the whole flock or herd. Not the nicest thing, but para para is a synonym as an expression to shwai shwai. Shwai shwai is Arabic, as we talked about in our slang session. A lot of expressions, a lot of everyday casual talk is in Arabic, right? Because Arabic is the language of the vast majority of Jews who made Aliyah at the start of the founding of the State of Israel in 1948 came from Muslim countries. Their everyday language that they were more familiar with was Arabic. Then it became repressed, just like Yiddish became repressed among Ashkenazim. And instead, we have a lot of slang that comes from Arabic and other languages, just like with Yiddish and Ladino. Shwai shwai is heard a lot, not just by Jews from Muslim countries, but also by Palestinians. And so we use this term a lot. It means the same thing as para para. Both of these are best translated as step by step or slowly. Okay. The way you can say this in Hebrew non-idiomatically is on the left-hand side, right? Like I said, when there's a non-idiomatic expression, I'm going to put it on, when there's a non-idiomatic way to say it, I'm going to put it on the left-hand side. In this case, you could either say shlav achrei shlav, which is a little too much to say. The easiest way to say step by step or slowly is le'at le'at. Okay, le'at le'at, you've probably all heard before. You probably know it by its English translation of slowly slowly. Probably heard many Israelis say slowly slowly, or you yourselves say that, right? It comes a direct translation from the Hebrew, le'at le'at. Le'at le'at is not an idiom. Okay, it means slowly, slowly. Cow, cow is an idiom because you can't just say cow, cow in English and for someone to understand that, right? That's the difference we're talking about here. Para, para, or shwai, shwai, the same things as le'at, le'at. Okay, so if you ever want to say to someone, slow down, slowly, step by step, take it easy in the sense of don't get ahead of yourselves, you can either say para para, shwai shwai, or lat lat. Just know that para para is more slang on the spectrum of idioms. That's a much more casual expression. You don't want to necessarily use that with a boss or someone you want to show some deference to. This is a great one, especially as we come up to the holiday season. We have a couple in this list that have to do with holidays. Holidays are a big deal in Jewish culture and certainly in Israeli society. And this is a great one. L'chol Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat. You could say this is a saying, but we use this also as an idiom to talk about everyday things. We don't just use it as a direct reply to someone. We use it along the way, excuse me, describe something. L'chol Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat. This literally translates, row 5, as for every Shabbat, there is a motzei Shabbat, or there's a Saturday night, right? For every Shabbat, there's a Saturday night. Think about Shabbat, your own experience, whether you're observant or not. Shabbat is great, at least in Israel, it's a break from work. It's a weekly vacation, or it's Shabbat in the spiritual sense. And then you have to come down from that experience and get ready for the regular week ahead on Saturday night, right? Saturday night in Israel is Sunday night in the Western world. You have to get used to getting ready back to school, is another way to think about it, right? L'chol Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat is best translated as the English expression or English idiom, everything comes in due time. This is more of an expression than an idiom. L'chol Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat. So basically for every high, there's going to be a low. Or for every up, there's a down, however you want to best translate that. But everything comes in due time, meaning it isn't always gonna, to use another expression, another idiom, it's not always gonna smell of roses, right? For every Shabbat, there's a Motzei Shabbat, there's an after Shabbat. This is a good one to use if you are wanting to tamper someone's excitement over something or something along those lines. It's a bit of a downer, but it's part of life, not the entirety of life, of course. This is a great one, row 6. This one, if you can use this in everyday expressions, in everyday conversation, even at the most beginner's level, you will wow everyone around you. Aliyah v'kotzba. Okay, this is Aliyah with an aleph, not with an ayin, so please don't rush to correct my spelling here. It's Aliyah v'kotzba. Aliyah v'kotzba. So let's explain this a bit. Aliyah with an aleph, not with an ayin, as in aliyah, like what all of you have done or are about to do, right? Aliyah with an aleph is the fat in the back of animals, usually around the tail, usually around with sheep and goats. This is considered a very precious, a high quality fat, animal fat. Think about the temple. When the temple used to be in existence and we had animal sacrifice, that was considered a very high offering, the aliyah. The aliyah was the fat around the tail, so in the back, in the rump of the animal, among specific animals like sheep and goats, not sheeps. Shows how much I've been in Israel. And it's considered a very highly praised, highly sought after piece of the animal. And kotz, the word kotz, the second word in our expression is a thorn, right? So the fat of the animal, the tail fat of an animal, and the thorn that's inside it, or the thorn that's in it, right? Ba is referring to in it, as in the fat, aliyah. So aliyah v'kotzba is the fat and the thorn that's inside it, which if you want to find the corresponding English expression is fly in the ointment, a little bit dated, but a mixed blessing, right? You're getting both the good and the bad at the same time. Aliyah v'kotzba. You could use this in a comparative sentence when you're comparing one thing with another, like it's pluses and minuses, it's pros and cons. Or if you are trying to express that something is a mixed blessing or that it's fly in the ointment. Aliyah v'kotzba is really good Hebrew, really high Hebrew. You will wow people knowing that you know this expression. Okay. Next one. 7. Lo dubim v'lo ya'al. Actually, 7 and 8 we're going to get to together because they mean essentially the same thing and they have a similar construct in Hebrew. Lo dubim velo ya'ar. Dubim is the plural of dov, which is a bear, B-E-A-R, the animal. And ya'ar is a forest, right? So not the bears and not the forest is literally how this translates. And the other way that we say this in Hebrew is row 8. Lo x, you fill in the blank, what is x? Velo na'alaim. Okay, both of these translate into the Hebrew over here in column B, Lohaya velo nivra. You've probably heard this a lot. The former prime minister, a lot of politicians like to use this term a lot. Lohaya velo nivra means like it never happened. On the most cynical side of things, it's the way you gaslight someone in Hebrew. Is saying Lohaya velo nivra literally means it never happened, it wasn't even created. Lohaya, it wasn't. Velo nivra, it wasn't created, it never took place. Okay, the idiomatic ways we say that is lo dubim velo ya'ar. There's no tree, there's no bears and there's no tree, or lo x velo na'alaim. Okay, either of these mean you're full of it, it never happened, what nonsense, but really negating whatever the other person is saying. Okay, so if you want to say to someone, I can't even think of an example right now, but the point is, this is what you would say to someone to negate whatever they're saying, or say or deny what they're accusing you of or accusing someone else of. These are two ways to say it. The second one, lo x velo na'alaim. So let's say I was talking about someone cheated on someone else. The word for cheating in Hebrew is bgida. Comes from the verb livgod. Begida is like cheating on someone, like someone you're in a relationship with. So I could say lo bgida velo na'alaim. All right, there's no way that person cheated on me, or you're full of it. There's no way that person cheated on him or her. It doesn't matter, right? That's how I would use it. Whatever I'm negating, I would put in that X, and then I would say velo na'alaim. This one actually comes from Arabic. Like I said, a lot of our expressions come from the languages and the cultures which Jews emigrated from. This one is from an expression in Arabic where instead of shoes, they use the term for watermelon, which in Arabic is batich, much similar to Hebrew avatiach. And it's the same concept where it's just instead of shoes, which is what are na'alaim, they just say watermelon, right? So no cheating and no shoes, or no cheating and no watermelon. They're both understood to mean you're full of it, it never happened. Okay, so if you ever want to deny something and vociferously deny it, that's what you want to say here. Lo dubim velo ya'ar, or lo x velo na'alaim, and you fill in the X there. Okay, this next one, I talked about we were going to do two different expressions that are relevant to our current events. Row 9 is it. Pam Shlishit glida. You have probably heard this term in the last 2 to 3 weeks ad nauseum, again and again and again. Why? Because we're just coming off in Israel having the mana shlishit. Mana is a dose, shlishit third. Right, so now that everyone above the age of 12 is approved for a mana shlishit of the chisun, the third dose of the vaccine, you'll be hearing a lot, if not on Facebook, then in person, pam shlishit glida. This is a very popular expression used all the time in Israel. It's the combination of third time's the charm, and when two people say the same thing at the same time, at least here in America where I'm visiting, and then you say jinx, you do that jinx 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then whoever gets to the end first or not owes the other person a Coke or a Pepsi, depending on where you live in the country. That's a whole other slice of life there, right? It's a combination of those two. If you bump into someone for the second time, right? You bump into someone on the street you haven't seen in a while. Oh, it's so nice to see you, and you go your way. Second time you bump into them in the same day and you haven't seen them for a long time, you would say Pam Shlishit Glida, right? The third time we meet, let's meet up for ice cream. Right? It's not by chance. It's by chance that we're meeting up all these times, or that something keeps happening serendipitously. So the third time, we're acknowledging that this is not something that normally happens, right? So that's why people are saying Pam Shlishit Glida, and they're posing with ice cream. I myself, when I got the third dose, I went out and bought a pint of ice cream, put it on my arm as a ice pack to make the joke even more clear, right? Third time ice cream is how it translates. Pam Shlishit Glida. But you say this like third time's the charm. It's the same exact expression. We use it to note that something serendipitously, that fortunately has taken place without our knowledge or intervention. And third time's the charm. Another holiday one, row 10 here. Lo kol yom Purim. Okay. Lo kol yom Purim literally translates to not every day is Purim or Purim, that you may be more familiar with the pronunciation. Not every day is Purim. This translates best to not every day is a holiday. Similar to L'chol Shabbat Yesh Motzei Shabbat that we talked about before, this one is more, Purim is great and it's wonderful, but it ain't gonna happen every day. So same thing, sort of a downer. Not every day is gonna be full of roses. That's another great expression to have, right? In Hebrew, we would say Lo kol yom Purim. Again, maybe to tamper down someone's expectations, or to mellow out, or any of those things. Okay. Another one, shmum. Shmum is shmum. Sorry, it comes from I believe it's the 1950s. The story goes it's an exchange between then Foreign Minister Moshe Sharet and Prime Minister Ben Gurion, who were talking about the UN's intervention in the Suez crisis, the Suez War. And Moshe Sharet says something to the effect of, had it not been for the UN recognizing us, we wouldn't necessarily have a state. And Ben Gurion intervenes, shmum. If it wasn't for us Zionists, we wouldn't have a Jewish state for all the work that we did to build it. Right? Shmum takes the word and we talked about this several weeks ago. When you see two apostrophes between the second to last and last letters of a word, you know it's an abbreviation or an acronym. And it's taking the prefix sh. Sh or shma comes from Yiddish. Think of all the words that you know in Yiddish or don't know Yiddish at all, but you've heard these words that begin with shma. Shmuck, shmagegi, shlamil, all of those words, right? And so it's making fun of the word and stands for umot mechudot, ha'umot ha'mechudot, which is the Hebrew way that we say the UN, right? Is the UN, and we're making fun of the UN by adding the sh in front of it. So shmum is a rhyme, but it's like saying a classic line from Bugs Bunny. Consequences, schmonsequences, right? You know this, you hear this a lot in especially American English that's inflected with Yiddish, where you add the shma in front of something to make it both rhyme, but sort of to downplay it, to belittle it. That's what we do here. So if you reply to something with shmum, you're probably referring to something of international consequences, not necessarily the UN. Right, but you're just saying all the like fooey, like who the hell cares? Shmum, so what? No big deal, or what do I care? It's a lot of similar things like that. The catch-all word in Hebrew would be here on the left-hand side in row 11, shtuyot, right? Shtuyot in Hebrew means nonsense. A lot of these expressions best get translated as to nonsense. Not that they necessarily are nonsense, but that's how they're best understood. But shmum is a great one that you'll hear every once in a while, usually in an international relations, foreign affairs context, but it doesn't have to be. You could be very creative and use shmum to dismiss what someone else is saying or the importance of it, right? Like if someone was talking about the importance of a certain decision by someone, you could say, shmum. Like, what do I care? That's no big deal. Okay, row 12. דברים שרואים משם לא רואים מכאן. This one is pretty straightforward, I think, but it's an important one because you hear this one quite a lot. דברים שלא רואים משם, דברים שרואים משם לא רואים מכאן. Okay, דברים, things, שרואים משם, that you see from there, שם is there, לא רואים מכאן, you don't see from here. Right, so the expression literally translates to things that you can see from over there, you can't necessarily see from here. Okay, this comes from a line in a song written by a very famous composer in Israel, Ehud Manor, in a song called Lakachta et yadi beyadcha. You took my hand in your hand. The famous version of it is sung by Yehudit Ravitz. It's a very popular song from the 70s. And the end of the, I think it's the end of the verses or the end of the chorus is Dvarim sheroim misham lo roim mikan. This best gets translated as that's easy for you to say. It's used in Israeli discourse as someone who's complaining about something and then get into the position of what they were complaining about and realize it's much more complicated than they ever gave it credit, right? This is used a lot in political satire. The opposition party complaining about something until they get into power and then realize, oh no, that was actually, they were actually right, or we were way off with that. But that's easy for you to say, is a nice way to translate that. It's really easy for you to complain, דברים שרואים משם לא רואים מכאן. Like, it's really easy for you to complain. That's easy for you to say. You don't have to deal with this. This is that kind of expression. Okay, we did that one. And then the last one I have here, which I said we were going to talk about, is literally Achrei HaChagim. Achrei HaChagim translates as after the holidays. And HaChagim in particular that we're talking about, Chagim, holidays, the holidays, we're referring to the holidays we're about to start celebrating, right? The fall holidays, I like to call it the holiday season, as an affront to a certain other holiday season. But the point is, Achrei Chagim is, think about how long the holiday season in Jewish tradition is, right? We start with Rosh Hashanah, even before Rosh Hashanah and getting ready for it. And then we go all the way through Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah. It's a long time of celebrations, 22, 23, 24 days. And right before the holiday season, we're so caught up with it that oftentimes other things like work or friendships or relationships get sort of messed up or put aside. And we often say, Bo nitapel baze, let's take care of that, achrei chagim. Let's take care of that after the holidays, we'll literally say. Or we'll worry about that achrei chagim. This I put as a translation, a rough translation, is let's do lunch. This is something you're not looking forward to taking care of. You're putting it aside. You're not really taking it seriously at the moment because you can't, right? So there's two ways to think about achrei chagim. Let's take care of this after the holidays, meaning I just don't have the space for this right now. Let's take care of it at another time. You could use this expression at another time of the year, right? It could be a really busy time for you at work, and you're telling someone, Ani me'od amus ba'avoda, I'm very busy at work. Bona netapel baze, let's take care of this achrei chagim. Let's take care of this after the holidays. It's not understood that you're meaning back in the fall and this is January. It's just understood, I don't have time for this, let's take care of this later. Or you are purposely trying to avoid, something like let's do lunch, right? We all know the expression let's do lunch when said by an American. They don't really mean let's do lunch. Oh, it's so great to see you. Let's meet up again. Achrei Chagim is a nice way to say to someone, I hear you, I just can't take care of this, but I'm going to at least humor you into believing I care about this, and we're going to move it later. Achrei Chagim is a way to either shift the blame or shift the importance of something, or just put it aside because you just can't get to it. And it's probably not that important to you. The way you would say this in modern Hebrew is like I wrote here on the far left in column B. Bo nipagesh mataishu bekarov. Bo nipagesh, come let's meet, mataishu, sometime, bekarov, in the future, or soon. Better as soon, right? Let's meet up sometime soon. It's like saying let's do lunch, right? You're not actually putting a time on it. Just like Achrei Chagim is a long period after a long period. I don't necessarily know when that's going to be. You don't know when that's going to be. But it's a way to sort of toss something aside that isn't as important for you at the moment. Okay? So Achrei Chagim is when we're next going to meet. I'm going to answer your questions in just a minute, but just why I want to end with Achrei Chagim. You're going to hear this expression a lot in the next few weeks, in the next few days in Israel, to say like, we'll take care of this after the holiday season, right? Politicians will say that, people at your job will say that, relatives will say that. Bo nidag lezeh achrei Chagim. Let's worry about that after the holidays, meaning I got too much on my plate right now. We'll take care of that later. Okay, I see we have a bunch of questions, hopefully just in the Q&A. If you wrote them in the chat, now is your chance to write them in the Q&A because I'm only referring to the Q&A for questions about this session. So again, thank you in advance for your help with that. Okay. Elisheva asks about Aliyah v'kotzba. Is this the same as kotz betachat? Kotz betachat means a thorn in your butt or a thorn in your behind. No, this is not the same thing. A thorn in your behind is something that's pestering you, right? A thorn in the back is something that's bothering you, that's like an itch. Aliyah v'kotzba is fly in the ointment. It's a mixed blessing. It may be bothering you, but there's also a positive thing to it. David asks, what does you're full of it mean? I'm not an English speaker. Great question, because we're dealing with Nefesh B'Nefesh here, and thus North America and UK didn't presuppose that people wouldn't understand that here. But David, I believe, is writing to us from Germany, and thank you and welcome from Germany, David. You're full of it means it's nonsense. You're exaggerating. You are, you are full of yourself is usually the longer expression, meaning that you're over exaggerating. Oh, I see a lot of people did not like me using the term jinx. So apologies if that confused people. Third time the charm, pam shlishit glida, if that's the best way for you to understand that, great. Just making it clear, pam shlishit glida does not 100% translate to third time's the charm, right? Because third time's the charm implies that you had some doing in its happening, right? The third time's the charm is like, I fixed it for the third time and this time it's gonna stick. Pam Shlishit Glida is all about serendipity. It's all about something happening by chance. It is not on purpose. Okay, so that's why I use the term jinx, like when two kids say something at the same time and they both yell out jinx. That may be a very American thing, and that's why it threw people off. Apologize for that, but we are talking about idioms here. Okay, it's not a jinx on someone to say that. It's a positive thing to say, Pam Shlishit Glida. Jinx is a game. It's a linguistic game that kids play here in America, where if you say something, the exact same thing at the exact same time, you both scream out jinx or Pepsi, you count up, and the person who loses in counting the quickest has to owe the other person a Pepsi. Okay. Jeanette has an even better way with shmoom, fancy schmancy. That was the expression I was looking for, right? Fancy schmancy. It's like, it's so fancy, it's not fancy. Mark said a great thing, right? After the second of 4 elections that we had in the last year and a half, you heard many people say Pam Shlishit Glida before the 3rd elections, right? Because again, you would say Pam Shlishit Glida before the 3rd time you do something, right? So many people are saying, as they get the booster shot, Pam Shlishit Glida, let's hope this time it sticks. That's the way it refers to 3rd time's the charm. But it's also used in Hebrew as you bumped into someone twice in a row in a very short period of time. 3rd time, let's go out for ice cream, meaning let's celebrate this, that we keep meeting up like this. Okay, Shoshana asks a great question here. Sometimes people actually mean let's do lunch. Can you specify not mean it on the chart? I'm going to say it instead of write it. One of the jokes that Israelis and perhaps many nationalities of the world have among Americans is that let's do lunch seldom actually results in lunch. If it does, great on you people who do that. But often we use the term let's do lunch as a throw off of, yeah, it was so great to see you, let's do lunch. But you don't actually follow through. That's what we mean here with Acharei Chagim. We're not really going to follow through, or we just don't have the headspace to think about it right now. Mickey asks, is the expression after Shabbat, lechod Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat, always have a negative connotation? Yes, right? Shabbat is something that we're glad to have. Motzei Shabbat, not necessarily glad to have. It may not be negative for you. It may be negative for the person you're speaking to. Right? The person that you may be speaking to may be having a great time with X thing, but you're not. And so you're actually looking forward to their good time being done, right? That could be objective. That could be just you being bitter or sadistic, as it were. But L'chol Shabbat yesh motzei Shabbat, there is someone, either the speaker or the listener, who's not having a good time or is about to not have a good time. Arnold says you can use the Yiddish term narishkeit as nonsense. Arnold, this is, and everyone else, that is a great term, but this is a modern Hebrew class. Narishkeit is Yiddish. Maybe some people will understand it, but in modern Hebrew, the term is shtuyot. That is the modern Hebrew term for nonsense. Aviva, American idioms are not English ones, so jinx in English is snap. Good to know. Thank you, Aviva, for that. Miri, can you say shmum instead of bull when you disagree with someone to a high degree? Yep, absolutely. It goes along with lo dubim velo ya'ar and lo x velo nalaim is shmum. When you're disagreeing with someone and saying that they're full of it, they're full of nonsense, or you're talking nonsense, you can say shmum to them. Apparently the Brits do say 3rd time lucky. We do not say that in America. We say 3rd time's the charm. But if you say 3rd time lucky, then you'll understand Pam Shlishit Glida even more. Okay. I see a bunch of people ask specific questions about this class in the chat. I'm just going over there as we have a few more minutes. Again, folks, please, in future classes, if you have a question about this specific class, write in the Q&A, not in the chat. Just making sure that we didn't mix anything here. Getting a lot of self-corrections. Thank you all for that. Anne asks, I have had a lot of trouble using an online dictionary for abbreviations. Yes, Anne, we did a class several weeks ago on abbreviations and acronyms. If you go to youtube.com, find the Cafe Oleh session that's called Abbreviations and Acronyms, you'll see I referred to a website that has a full compendium of all abbreviations and acronyms in Hebrew on it, and it writes out for you, it delineates for you what it means. I don't remember off the top of my head. But if you go to that session, it's written out. I write it out as well as I show it in the screen. Okay. Any last questions in the Q&A? Okay, so with that, we're going to end a little early unless anyone has any last questions in the Q&A section, of course, not in the chat. So thank you all for joining us. As I said, we are going to take a break for the holiday season, and we're going to meet Acharei Chagim. That is the literal meaning of Acharei Chagim. But no, I'm not putting it off. We are going to meet in October. You will get a announcement via email from Nefesh B'Nefesh as to when our next date will be, but it will probably be in the first or second week of October after the holiday season. And we're going to take a break until then. Again, you can go back to youtube.com, find out all of our previous sessions to go over them. And please be in touch with Nefesh B'Nefesh if you have any suggestions for future lessons for us to go over together. I'd be happy to take those into account. And with that, I'm going to stop here. Wish you all a Shana Tova. Wishing you all a happy new year ahead and Chag Sameach as well. You'll hear both of those, by the way, used in Israel a lot. Both Shana Tova and Chag Sameach. We'll say in front of all the different holidays we have. Moadim L'Simcha in the days, the Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days in Sukkot. But certainly we say all of that together. So again, Shana Tova to you all. May you all have a wonderful, happy, and equally healthy new year ahead. And I will see you all Acharei Chagim, the first or second week of October 2021. Take care, Toda Rabba, and Lehitraot.